I thought I knew every dark secret my family had until I found an old cassette tape hidden in my late grandmother's sewing kit, and what I heard on it not only shattered my childhood memories, but pulled me into a web of small-town lies, betrayals, and a 30-year-old crime that everyone swore had been buried forever. If my grandmother were alive, she'd probably laugh at how I found it. She always kept that battered floral sewing kit under her bed, stuffed with tangled threads, half-broken zippers, and buttons that didn't match anything. She used to joke that every home needs a place for things that have no place. After she passed, my mother asked me to help clear her room. The scent of lavender and mothballs clung to the air, the kind of smell you don't notice when someone's alive but hits you like a wave when they're gone. I was kneeling by the bed, pulling out old shoeboxes of letters, when my hand brushed the sewing kit. It was heavier than I remembered. Inside, beneath layers of folded fabric, I found an old, dust-coated cassette tape. No label, just a strip of yellowing masking tape with a single word written in shaky pen. Listen, I don't even own a cassette player. Who does anymore? But my mom's old stereo was still in the attic, collecting dust with the Christmas decorations. I hauled it down, plugged it in, and carefully pushed the tape into the slot. At first, all I heard was static. Then a voice, faint, trembling, filled the room. "Lydia," it began. My grandmother's voice. Only she wasn't speaking to me. "This is for when I'm gone. If you found this, it means you've started looking for the truth. I can't change what happened, but I can tell you my part in it. And if you're smart, you'll stop listening now." I froze. My heart was beating in my throat, but my hand refused to stop the tape. "There was a night in October, 1992, she continued, her voice low, deliberate. "They said it was an accident. They said she fell. But I saw what happened, and I promised I'd keep quiet for him. For all of them." The tape clicked, then went silent for a long, breathless moment before she spoke again. "It wasn't just a fall, Lydia. Someone pushed her." The she my grandmother spoke about could have been anyone. I racked my brain for names, neighbors, old friends, distant relatives, but nothing clicked. My grandmother never told long stories about her youth, only scattered bits and pieces, like puzzle pieces she never let me finish. The tape whirred softly. Then she continued. "They found her at the bottom of Miller's Bluff. Broke her neck. She was only 23. Her name was Claire Henson. I knew that name. Not well, but enough to know it carried weight in our small town. Claire's picture was still framed on the wall of Miller's diner, smiling, holding a cup of coffee, her hair in loose curls. My mom once told me she was the prettiest girl in town back in the day, but she had a knack for trouble." Grandma's voice dropped lower. "I saw him do it, Lydia. I saw James." The tape hissed suddenly, and the sound warped. The name was swallowed by static. I smacked the side of the stereo, desperate to hear the rest, but it kept skipping, garbling every third word. When the sound cleared again, she was crying. I kept my mouth shut because I was scared. We all were. "But I can't take it with me. If you're going to do something with this, you'll have to be careful. He's still alive." Click. The tape ended. I sat there, staring at the stereo, my skin prickling. If this was true, then the fall everyone in town had believed for 30 years was actually a murder. And the killer, James, was still out there. It could have been James Miller. The Millers practically owned the town, from the bluff itself to half the businesses on Main Street. Or maybe James Harper, the quiet mechanic who'd worked at my mom's old high school. I decided to start small. I went to the public library and pulled out the old microfilm machine. The smell of paper and dust clung to the air, and the faint hum of the machine made my pulse quicken. I searched for Claire Henson in the local archives. It didn't take long. October 12th, 1992, local tragedy at Miller's Bluff. The headline was simple, almost casual. The article said she'd slipped during a late-night walk. No foul play suspected. No witnesses. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the words. If my grandmother was a witness, then someone had lied and convinced the entire police department to play along. But the article had something else. A photograph of the candlelight vigil held a week after her death. And there, in the background, stood my grandmother, right next to a man I recognized immediately, James Miller. James Miller was older now, probably in his 60s, but I still saw him every so often around town. He owned Miller's Diner, and everyone treated him like royalty. He was the kind of man who slapped backs, bought rounds at the bar, and spoke like he'd known you your whole life. If Grandma's story was true, he'd been carrying a murderer's secret all these years, his own. I couldn't just walk up to him and accuse him. I needed proof. The next day, I stopped by the diner. James was behind the counter, wiping a coffee mug. "Lydia," he said warmly, like we were old friends. "Haven't seen you in forever. How's your mom?" I smiled tightly. "She's good. I've been going through some of Grandma's old things. Found some interesting stuff. His smile didn't fade, but something shifted in his eyes. Just a flicker. Interesting like what? I shrugged. Oh, just old photos. Some tapes. He nodded slowly. You know, sometimes it's better not to dig too deep into the past. That night, I came home to find my front door slightly open. My heart stopped. I live alone, and I never leave it unlocked. Inside, nothing looked out of place. But when I went into the living room, the stereo was gone. So was the tape. I stood there, numb, as the realization sank in. Someone had been in my house. Someone who knew exactly what they were looking for. The police came, took a report, but nothing felt official. The officer barely wrote anything down. When I mentioned the tape, he exchanged a glance with his partner and muttered, "Probably just some junk." That's when I knew. This wasn't just about my grandmother's secret. The whole town was in on it. The next morning, I woke to the sound of gravel crunching outside. From my bedroom window, I saw a dusty black pickup truck parked halfway at my driveway. A man in a cap sat behind the wheel, his face shadowed. He didn't move. For a moment, I thought about calling the police. Then I remembered the look on the officer's face last night. The kind of look that says we won't help you, but we'll make note of the factor causing trouble. Instead, I grabbed my phone and snapped a picture through the blinds. By the time I looked up again, the truck was gone. I needed help. Someone outside the town. Someone who didn't have decades of loyalty to the Millers. That's when I remembered my cousin Dean. He moved to Chicago years ago after getting in trouble for, well, let's just say Dean had a habit of finding things that didn't belong to him. But he also had a knack for getting information. I called him. "Lydia? Damn, it's been years. What's up? I need to find out everything you can about James Miller. From the 90s. And Claire Henson." There was a pause on the line. "Those names mean something to you?" he asked. "They will when I'm done." 2 days later, Dean called back. "So, you're onto something, cuz Miller's clean on paper. But guess what? The night Claire died, he withdrew 10 grand from his personal account. Cash. Never explained." And Dean's voice dropped. "There's an unlisted police report that went missing in '93. I can't get it, but I know it existed." That was my first real confirmation. Something happened that night, and it was covered up. Dean offered to come down. I told him no. Not yet. I didn't want him in the crosshairs until I understood how dangerous this was. On Friday, I came home from work and found an envelope taped to my front door. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed in block letters. "Stop asking about Claire. Some things don't need answers." No signature. No return address. Just a faint smell of cigarette smoke on the paper. I burned it in the sink. If they wanted me to stop, it meant I was close. I went back to the diner, this time in the late afternoon when it was nearly empty. James wasn't behind the counter, just a younger waitress named Shelby, who looked barely 20. I ordered coffee and casually asked, "Did you ever hear about Claire Henson?" Shelby froze for a moment before pouring the coffee. "I mean, yeah, everyone's heard about her." "Why?" "I just heard there might have been more to her death." Shelby's eyes darted toward the kitchen door, then back at me. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "You didn't hear that from me. But my mom said she saw Claire with Mr. Miller the night she died. At the Bluff. They were arguing." My pulse quickened. "What about?" Shelby shook her head. "She never told me. Just said that when the police came around, she kept her mouth shut. Everyone did." Before I could press further, the kitchen door swung open and James himself stepped out, carrying a tray of pies. He looked right at me. The smile never reached his eyes. That night, I spread everything I knew across my kitchen table. The article, the photograph, Dean's findings, Shelby's words. One thing became clear. Claire wasn't the only one who had fallen at Miller's Bluff. In the 20 years since, there had been 3 other deaths there. All labeled accidents. All late at night. One of them was a man named Tyler Ross, who supposedly tripped while taking pictures. Another was a woman named Jenna Price, who slipped after drinking. And all 3 had some connection to the Millers. It wasn't an accident site. It was a dumping ground. At 2:17 a.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered cautiously. A deep, raspy voice said, "You're not going to find what you're looking for, Lydia." "Who is this?" "You think you're digging for the truth, but you're digging your grave. Walk away." Click. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. By Saturday morning, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't stopping. They'd taken the tape, but Grandma's words were burned into my memory. If she risked telling me that before she died, I owed it to her to finish what she started. And if James Miller killed Claire Henson and maybe others, then I was going to make sure the whole town knew. Even if it killed me. Saturday evening, the rain came down hard, hammering the roof like it wanted in. I sat in Grandma's old armchair, Staring at the box of her things, I still hadn't gone through completely. It was mostly letters, recipes, and yellowed photographs. But when I lifted the stack out, I noticed the base of the box felt heavier on one side. I tapped it. Hollow. A false bottom. I slid a knife under the edge and pried it up. Inside was a folded manila envelope wrapped in twine. My hands shook as I untied it. Inside were newspaper clippings, handwritten notes, and most chilling of all, a Polaroid photograph of a woman lying face down on the rocks below the bluff. Blood darkened the stone around her head. On the back, in Grandma's tight script, Claire Henson, September 17th, 1993. Among the papers was a hand-drawn map of the bluff area. Certain spots were circled in red ink, with numbers beside them. 1, first fight. 2, where she fell. 3, pickup. Pickup? I stared at that word for a long time. If Grandma wrote this, it meant she didn't believe Claire's body was found exactly where she fell. The implication was horrifying. Someone had moved her. I drove out there the next morning. The air was crisp and biting, the smell of wet earth still heavy from last night's rain. The bluff's main lookout point was fenced now, with a plaque warning about unstable ground. Tourists sometimes came here for sunset photos, but this early, it was deserted. Using Grandma's map, I followed a narrow deer trail that veered left of the fence. It led to a sheer drop-off hidden by thick brush. This was the spot she marked as pickup. From here, it would be easy for someone to drive up close on the dirt road below, load something, or someone into a vehicle, and disappear without anyone seeing. That afternoon, I found a small magnetic tracker under my car's rear bumper. My stomach dropped. Someone had been keeping tabs on me. I put the tracker in a tin box to block the signal and left it in my neighbor's trash can just to make whoever planted it think I was somewhere else. Dean called again that night. I dug deeper. Lydia, this guy Miller's connected to more than just your little town. There's a property in his name in Tennessee that's been linked to at least 2 missing persons cases. Both women. Both in the 90s. Do the police know? I asked. He gave a bitter laugh. Police? They were the ones who filed those cases, inconclusive. I told him about the tracker. Yeah, he said. You're in it now. Be careful, cuz. I went back to the diner one last time. Shelby served me coffee with trembling hands. I waited until James disappeared into the back before leaning forward. You saw something, didn't you? I whispered. Her lip trembled. My mom did. She saw him push her. Claire. She was screaming. Then he climbed down after her. Came back alone. I felt ice crawl up my spine. Why didn't she say anything? Shelby's voice cracked. Because James's brother is the sheriff. And because the last person who talked ended up accidentally falling too. Later that day, I parked outside the sheriff's office and just watched. Sheriff Miller, older, heavier, but with the same cold eyes as James, came out to smoke. He scanned the street like a man who already knew where every threat was coming from. When his gaze flicked toward my car, I started the engine and drove away. I wasn't ready to face him yet. 2 nights later, I decided to stop waiting for answers and start taking them. James Miller's house sat on the edge of town, its front porch light always flickering like it had a bad bulb. He wasn't home, his truck was gone, and the diner was closed for repairs that day. I used the side window. The lock was old, the frame warped from years of weather. It slid up with a squeal that sounded like a warning. Inside, it smelled of stale smoke and motor oil. His desk was in the corner of the living room, papers piled high. I started leafing through them, careful not to leave smudges. Under a stack of unpaid bills, I found a manila folder labeled C. Henson. Inside were more photographs, far more than I expected. Claire smiling in front of the bluff. Claire at the diner counter. Claire leaving church. Then, Claire on the ground, her hair matted with blood. Different angles. Some zoomed in like whoever took them wanted every detail. My throat tightened. These weren't crime scene photos. The angles were wrong. Too close. These were personal. There was also a single photograph of my grandmother, taken from across the street, her head turned mid-laugh. The date on the back read, October 1993. The crunch of gravel outside snapped me back to reality. I stuffed the photos into my bag, shoved the folder back in place, and ducked behind the couch. The front door creaked open. Heavy boots on wood. A pause. Then the sound of keys clinking against a table. I stayed perfectly still, holding my breath. After what felt like an hour, the footsteps went toward the kitchen. That's when I slipped out the same window I came in, landing in the damp grass with my heart trying to break free from my chest. Back home, I spread the photographs out on my table. I didn't notice until I reached the bottom of the stack that there was a folded page, part of Grandma's original map, but larger, more detailed. James had marked additional spots, with notes like truck route and drop point. One location was circled twice with the words, "Never tell sheriff." That circle location turned out to be an old barn deep in the woods, at the end of a muddy track that barely counted as a road. The place leaned with age, boards splintering, roof sagging. Inside, it smelled of rot and gasoline. Under a tarp, I found a crate full of women's shoes. Different sizes, styles, and decades. Some still had dried mud on them. And there, in the corner, half buried under hay, was a battered suitcase with CH painted on the side. The zipper was stiff with rust, but I forced it open. Inside were clothes, a hairbrush, and a diary. The first few pages were filled with neat handwriting. Claire wrote about the diner, about working with Shelby's mom, about how James made her uncomfortable. Then, a week before she died, "If something happens to me, it won't be an accident. James is watching me. I think he followed me home last night." I closed the diary, hands shaking. I called Dean, told him everything. "You need to get out of there," he said immediately. "Mail me the photos and the diary. I've got a contact in a paper who'll run this." "I can't just leave," I argued. "Grandma, she knew. She was keeping this for a reason." Dean sighed. "Then you need to decide if you want justice or survival. Because you won't get both here." I didn't get to decide. That night, as I came back from the store, a figure stepped out from behind my shed.
"James."
"Been poking around," he said, voice low. "Dangerous hobby." I tightened my grip on my keys. "I know what you did to Claire. And I know you followed my grandmother." He smiled, slow, cold. "Your grandma was smart. Smarter than you. She kept her mouth shut." I didn't wait to hear the rest. I ran for the front door, slammed it shut, and bolted it. I barely slept. At dawn, I smelled smoke. Running outside, I saw flames licking the side of my shed. The old wood went up fast, the heat blistering my skin as I tried to hose it down. By the time the fire department arrived, it was ash. They called it an accident. But I knew. James was telling me that if I didn't drop this, next time, it wouldn't be the shed. After the fire, I spent hours pacing my kitchen, staring at the photographs on the table. Every instinct screamed at me to pack up and leave, but I couldn't. If I left now, I'd be handing James the victory he thought he already had. Grandma hadn't been a coward. She had kept this evidence, hidden it, and trusted that someday someone would do something with it. That someone had to be me. I drove to Shelby's trailer on the edge of town. She answered the door with tired eyes, like she hadn't slept in days. "You ever think about leaving this place?" I asked. She laughed bitterly. "Every day. But my mom's buried here. My brother's here. It's like quicksand. The more you fight, the deeper you sink." When I told her about the suitcase, she went pale. "I remember that bag. Claire carried it everywhere the week before she died. Said she had something worth running for." I guess she never got the chance. Against Dean's advice, I took the diary to Sheriff Darnell. He sat behind his desk, flipping through it slowly. Then he closed it, slid it back toward me, and leaned forward. "You've been watching too many crime shows," he said. "That barn's been empty for years. And James Miller? He's a stand-up citizen. Served in the army. Volunteers at church." His eyes hardened. "Don't go spreading stories you can't prove. Folks around here don't take kindly to outsiders stirring trouble." That night, my phone rang from a block number. "You don't belong here," a male voice said. "Leave and nothing else has to happen. Stay, and we'll bury you where the ground's soft."
Click.
I stared at the phone until the screen went black, my reflection staring back like a ghost. The next morning, I drove out to the bluff where Claire's body had been found. It was quiet except for the wind, carrying the faint scent of pine and rain. I imagined her walking here, maybe meeting someone she trusted, only to realize too late what was coming. I spotted something half buried near a rock, a rusted locket. Inside was a faded photo of a little girl. On the back, in neat handwriting, "To see, love, M." I didn't call Dean, he just showed up. Said he couldn't sit by any longer. When I told him about the sheriff, he cursed under his breath. If the sheriff's protecting James, then we're not dealing with one man. We're dealing with an entire chain. We agreed to hit the barn again that night, dig deeper, literally if we had to. We brought shovels and a flashlight with dying batteries. The ground in one corner of the barn was softer than the rest. We dug until the metal blade hit something solid, a wooden box. Inside were more photographs, a bloodstained scarf, and another map. This one had even more names scribbled along the routes. At the very bottom was a Polaroid of James standing with the sheriff, both grinning, holding shovels. The sound of an engine cut through the silence. Headlights swept across the barn walls. Dean grabbed the box, I grabbed the map, and we bolted through the back. Shouts followed us. Boots pounding the ground. A gunshot cracked the night. We didn't stop running until we hit the truck. Dean floored it, mud spraying behind us as the barn disappeared into the dark. Back at my place, we scanned everything, photos, maps, diary entries, and uploaded them to multiple cloud drives. Dean said, "If they take one of us, the other keeps going. No matter what." I nodded, but deep down, I knew this wasn't just about us anymore. Just after midnight, there was a knock at the door. Not frantic, not hurried, just steady. Dean reached for the bat by the fridge. When I opened the door, it wasn't James. It was Shelby, shaking, holding a small box. "They're after me now," she whispered. "I think this belonged to Claire. My mom hid it in our attic." Inside was a cassette tape labeled, July 1997, Confession. The old cassette player in my kitchen whirred as the tape spun. A woman's voice crackled through, trembling. "If you're hearing this, I didn't make it. My name is Claire Hartwell. James Miller killed Jacob Rivers. He buried him in the North Bluff. Sheriff Darnell knows. They've been running girls across county lines, and anyone who talks disappears." There was a pause, then sobbing. "If they find this, please, tell my sister I tried to get out." I froze. Jacob Rivers, Grandma had mentioned him once in passing, as a boy who went missing the summer the town lost its innocence. Dean's face was pale. This is enough to bury them if we get it in the right hands." But the right hands in this town? That was a laugh. We decided to split the evidence into 3 copies. One physical, buried somewhere safe. One digital, stored on an encrypted drive. One sent to a contact Dean trusted in another state. If they came for us, they wouldn't be able to erase all of it. Shelby wanted to help, but she was terrified. "If they see me with you, I'm dead," she said. "But I can distract them tonight. James always drinks at the Copper Lantern after 9. If he's there, you'll have a window to whatever you need to do." We used that window to break into the sheriff's office. The back door lock was old, and Dean made quick work of it. In the basement filing room, we found a drawer labeled Cold Cases, 90s. Inside were files with photos paper-clipped, girls, boys, all young. Some had clothes stamped in red, even though the last notes were vague or incomplete. In one folder, a photo of Claire. But the cause of death section was blank.